The small scout ship tore through Earth's atmosphere, trailing flames and debris as it plummeted toward the snow-covered forests of Montana. Inside the failing vessel, alarms blared and red lights flashed as the crew fought desperately for control. Their navigator, Rose, worked frantically at her console, her pale blue skin glowing brighter with stress as she tried to stabilize their descent. "The engines are failing," she called out, her voice musical despite her fear. Her fingers danced across the holographic controls, leaving trails of light in their wake. "I can't maintain our flight path." The ship's captain looked at their rapidly approaching landing zone, a thick forest blanketed in winter snow. His expression hardened as he made a quick calculation. "Everyone, prepare for emergency protocols. We cannot risk detection by the humans." The vessel screamed through the night sky, its silver hull reflecting the moonlight. Rose's body slammed forward as the ship clipped the top of a massive pine tree. The impact sent her flying from her station, and she crashed hard against the far wall. Sharp pain shot through her chest and side. She felt the warm trickle of her silvery blood running down her face. The ship carved a deep trench through the forest floor before finally coming to rest in a smoking heap. Emergency lights flickered weakly in the darkness as the crew assessed their situation. Rose lay semi-conscious in the corner, her normally bright bioluminescence now dim and flickering like a failing light bulb. "Captain," the security officer said quietly, checking the ship's external sensors, "we have multiple human settlements within scanning range. We must evacuate immediately before they investigate the crash." The captain nodded grimly, then looked at Rose's crumpled form. "What about the navigator?" The ship's medic quickly scanned Rose with a handheld device. "Multiple internal injuries. Her healing abilities are trying to activate." But he shook his head. "Even with our advanced healing, she won't survive long enough for a rescue ship to reach us without being detected by humans." Rose tried to speak, but only managed a weak musical note. Her glow pulsed faintly with each labored breath. The captain closed his eyes for a moment, his face tight with regret. "We cannot risk our entire species being discovered by bringing attention to ourselves," he said finally. "The humans are too unpredictable, too dangerous. We must follow protocol." He turned to his crew. "Gather essential equipment and prepare to evacuate. Set the ship's systems to encrypt and delete all data." "Sir," the medic protested, "we can't just leave her." "Those are my orders," the captain cut him off sharply. "The needs of our civilization outweigh the life of one crew member." Rose knew the risks when she joined this mission. The crew worked quickly, salvaging what they could while destroying anything that might reveal their origin. Rose drifted in and out of consciousness, aware enough to understand she was being abandoned, but too weak to protest. Her people, the Luminary, were known throughout the galaxy for their advanced technology and healing abilities. But they were also known for their strict protocols regarding primitive species, especially humans, whom they viewed with particular fear and distrust. As the last crew member prepared to leave, the medic quickly pressed a small medical kit into Rose's hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Try to survive." Then he was gone. Snow began drifting into the ruined ship through the gaping holes in its hull. Rose lay there, her brightness fading as her body fought to heal itself. Her people's fear of humans had condemned her to die alone on this primitive world. The irony wasn't lost on her. Their advanced civilization had chosen to leave one of their own behind rather than risk contact with the supposedly savage humans. As consciousness slipped away, Rose's last thought was of the stories she'd heard about humans. Violent, unpredictable, dangerous. She wondered if those stories were true. In a few hours, she would find out. For now, the crashed ship lay silent in the snowy forest, its presence marked only by a thin trail of smoke rising into the winter night. Tom Baker trudged through the deep snow, his breath forming white clouds in the cold morning air. The forest ranger had been checking his wildlife cameras when he noticed something odd. All the animals in the area had suddenly vanished around midnight. 20 years of living in these Montana woods had taught him that animals didn't just disappear without reason. He adjusted his heavy backpack and checked his GPS unit. The morning sun filtered through the pine trees, casting long shadows across the pristine snow. Then he saw it, a strange track cut through the forest, like something had fallen from the sky. Trees were snapped and splintered, creating a clear path of destruction. "What in the world?" Tom muttered, following the trail. His hand instinctively went to the radio on his belt, but he hesitated. Something told him to investigate first before calling this in. The path led him to a site that made him stop dead in his tracks. Half buried in snow lay what could only be described as a spacecraft. Its silver hull was twisted and torn, with strange symbols etched across its surface. Steam still rose from parts of the wreckage, melting the snow around it. Tom's mind raced back to his military training. Before becoming a forest ranger, he'd served as a combat medic in the Army. Those years had taught him to assess situations calmly, even impossible ones. He pulled out his flashlight and carefully approached the wreck. "Hello," he called out, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Anyone in there?" The only response was the crunch of snow under his boots. He found what looked like an entrance and carefully made his way inside. The interior was otherworldly, smooth surfaces covered in dark screens and strange symbols. But what caught his attention was a faint, pulsing blue light coming from the back of the craft. Tom made his way toward the light, climbing over fallen debris. When he rounded a corner, he froze. There, lying crumpled against a wall, was a being unlike anything he'd ever seen. It looked almost human in shape, but its skin was pale blue and seemed to glow faintly. Silvery liquid, blood, he realized, had frozen in delicate patterns across the floor. The being's chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. It was alive. Tom's medical training kicked in immediately. He knelt beside the alien, noting how its glow flickered like a failing light bulb. Despite its strange appearance, he could recognize signs of trauma, labored breathing, wounds that were trying to heal dangerous cold exposure. "Hey there," he said softly, not knowing if it could understand him. "I'm here to help." The alien's eyes fluttered open briefly, revealing irises that swirled with colors like the northern lights. A weak musical tone emerged from its throat before it fell unconscious again. Tom found what looked like a small medical kit clutched in its hand. The contents were as alien as everything else, but he could guess their purpose. More importantly, he noticed how the being's wounds seemed to be very slowly healing themselves, but the process appeared to be failing in the cold. He made a quick decision. This creature needed immediate help, and he had the skills and resources to provide it. His cabin was less than a mile away, well stocked with medical supplies, and most importantly, private. "All right," he said, carefully wrapping his emergency blanket around the alien's slim form. "Let's get you somewhere warm." As he gently lifted the being, he noticed its features were feminine, almost delicate. Its skin was cool to the touch, but not as cold as he expected. The glow seemed to strengthen slightly at his touch. Tom looked around the wreck one last time. His trained eye could see that others had survived and left. The organized removal of equipment told him that. They had abandoned this one, leaving her to die. "Well," he said, securing his precious cargo as he prepared for the careful walk home. "Doesn't matter what planet you're from. No one deserves to be left behind like this." The winter forest was silent as Tom carried the alien through the snow, her faint glow reflecting off the white ground. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew he was doing the right thing. Sometimes, he thought, that's all anyone can do. Tom's cabin had never been so busy with activity. The spare room, usually filled with old books and camping gear, had been transformed into a makeshift medical bay. He'd moved his spare bed in there, set up his emergency medical equipment, and rigged a humidifier system after noticing how his alien patient seemed to breathe easier in humid air. The alien lay on the bed, her blue skin glowing steadily now, but still far dimmer than when he'd first seen her in the ship. Tom checked her vital signs using both his medical equipment and the strange devices from her medical kit. He was starting to understand how they worked, though the symbols were completely foreign to him. "Your healing ability is amazing," he said quietly, watching as another wound slowly sealed itself. "But you sure could use some help with the process." As if in response, she made a soft musical sound, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Her eyes fluttered open, those strange, swirling colors focusing on him for the first time since he brought her here 3 days ago. Tom stayed very still, not wanting to frighten her. "Hello," he said softly. "You're safe here." The alien tried to sit up but winced in pain. Tom gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Easy there. You're still healing." She looked at him with what seemed like surprise, then around the room with obvious curiosity. Her glow brightened slightly as she took in her surroundings. When she tried to speak, only musical tones came out. "Well, we'll have to work on communication," Tom said with a smile. He pointed to himself. "I'm Tom." The alien watched him carefully, then lifted her hand to her chest. She made a sound that was like a melody, beautiful, but impossible for a human throat to reproduce. Tom chuckled. "Mind if I call you Rose? Your skin has this rose-like glow to it." She tilted her head, considering, then nodded slowly. Tom grinned. "Well, that's a start." Over the next few days, they developed their own way of communicating. Rose proved to be a quick learner, picking up basic English words while teaching Tom to understand some of her musical tones. They used drawings to share more complex ideas, filling pages with pictures of their different worlds. Tom learned that her species needed more humidity than Earth's atmosphere provided. He rigged up more humidifiers and even created a basic steam system for the room. Rose's glow would brighten whenever he made these improvements, which he took as a sign of approval. One evening, as Tom changed her bandages, Rose caught his hand. She pointed to his medical supplies, then to herself, then made a series of musical tones that he learned meant different. "Yeah, I know you're different," Tom said, "but hurt is hurt, and help is help. Doesn't matter where you're from." Rose's glow pulsed brighter for a moment. She reached for their shared notebook and drew a picture of what Tom recognized as her ship. Then she drew several figures walking away from a single figure left behind. "They left you," Tom said quietly, "because they were afraid of humans finding them." Rose nodded, then drew a simple picture of a human figure helping another figure that glowed, clearly meant to be Tom helping her. She pointed to it and made the musical tone for different again, but this time it carried a questioning note. Tom understood. "You thought humans were dangerous, didn't you? That's what your people believed." Rose nodded slowly, her glow dimming slightly with what seemed like shame. Tom said gently, "Every species probably has good and bad in them. What matters is the choices we make when someone needs help." Rose's glow brightened again. She started drawing something new, a simple picture of Earth and her home world, with lines connecting them. Tom watched as she worked, understanding that something important was happening here. This wasn't just about saving one life anymore. It was about building a bridge between two worlds, one act of kindness at a time. The first sign of trouble came on a quiet morning 2 weeks after Tom had found Rose. He was chopping firewood outside his cabin when a faint humming sound caught his attention. Looking up, he spotted something that made his heart skip a beat. A small metallic sphere floating between the trees, scanning the forest with pale blue beams of light. Tom quietly set down his axe and walked inside, making sure to appear casual. Rose was sitting up in bed, her glow dimmed to almost nothing. She'd heard it too. "They're looking for you, aren't they?" Tom asked, keeping his voice low. Rose nodded, quickly drawing in their shared notebook. Her pictures showed multiple ships and dangerous-looking weapons. She pointed to herself, then made the musical tone that Tom now knew meant eliminate evidence. "They're not just here to rescue you," Tom realized. "They're here to make sure no one knows they exist." He looked at Rose. "Including you." Rose's glow flickered with what he recognized as fear. She drew another picture, humans being watched by her people, then crossed it out violently. The message was clear. Her civilization had been monitoring Earth for some time, and they had strict rules about keeping their existence secret. Tom peeked through the window. More scanning spheres had appeared, moving through the trees in a precise pattern. "We need to move," he said. "They'll find the cabin soon." He quickly packed a survival bag: food, water, medical supplies, and camping gear. Years of forest ranger work had taught him every hidden cave and ravine in these woods. He helped Rose up, noticing how much stronger she was now, but still not fully healed. They slipped out the back door just as one of the spheres approached the cabin. Tom led them through thick underbrush, using his knowledge of the terrain to avoid open spaces. Rose moved as quietly as she could, her glow dimmed to almost nothing. "There's a cave system about 2 miles from here," Tom whispered. "The mineral deposits in the rocks might help mask any traces of you they're trying to detect." A high-pitched whine filled the air. Rose grabbed Tom's arm, pulling him behind a large tree just as a sleek, silver aircraft passed overhead. Its design was similar to the crashed ship Tom had found her in, but this one was clearly built for hunting. They waited in tense silence until the ship passed. Tom noticed Rose trembling, not from cold but from fear. He squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Hey, I've spent 20 years learning every inch of these woods. Those fancy ships of theirs don't mean anything if you don't know the terrain." Rose made a quiet musical tone that Tom had learned meant "why." She pointed to herself, then to him, clearly asking why he was risking himself to help her. Tom thought for a moment. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply, "and because you've shown me that there's so much more to the universe than we humans knew. We can't let fear destroy the chance for our peoples to learn from each other." A series of sharp beeps came from one of the scanning spheres. It had picked up their trail. Tom grabbed Rose's hand. "Time to move. Trust me." Rose's glow pulsed once, brightly, before dimming again. She nodded. They ran deeper into the forest, Tom leading them through hidden paths and natural tunnels he discovered over the years. The sounds of the search party grew more distant as they used the landscape to their advantage. Tom smiled grimly as he heard the frustrated whine of engines above the tree canopy. All their advanced technology was being thwarted by simple knowledge of the land. But he knew they couldn't run forever. Sooner or later, they would have to face Rose's people. The only question was, when that moment came, would they be ready? Tom tightened his grip on Rose's hand as they moved through the shadows of the forest. Whatever happened, they would face it together. Deep within the cave system, Tom and Rose found a relatively comfortable spot to rest. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, and the mineral-rich walls sparkled faintly in the gentle light of Rose's bioluminescence. They had been hiding here for 3 days, moving between different chambers to avoid detection. Tom was checking their supplies when he noticed Rose drawing in their notebook again. Her pictures had become more detailed as she learned to communicate better. This time, she was drawing a timeline of sorts, showing how her people had watched Earth for many years. "You've been studying us?" Tom asked, sitting beside her. Rose nodded, then drew more. She showed humans advancing from simple tools to complex machines, each picture showing faster and faster progress. Then she drew her own people, watching with what looked like fear in their expressions. "Your civilization is afraid of how quickly we're developing," Tom realized. Rose made a musical tone of agreement. She drew another picture, this one showing humans reaching for the stars, then meeting other species. Beside it, she drew her own people hiding, watching, and sometimes making other species disappear. "You eliminate evidence of alien life to keep us isolated," Tom said quietly. "Because you think we're dangerous." Rose's glow dimmed slightly with shame. She pointed to Tom, then made the musical tone for different, a sound that had come to mean surprising or unexpected in their conversations. Tom smiled. "You know, humans have stories about first contact with aliens. A lot of them are about fear and violence." He paused, watching a drop of water catch the light of Rose's glow. "But we have other stories too. Stories about friendship, understanding, learning from each other. Rose tilted her head curiously. She drew a question mark, something she'd learned from Tom. Well, Tom continued, maybe your people are right that humans can be dangerous. We've made plenty of mistakes, but we can also be kind, curious, and caring. We want to learn and grow. We want to be better. Rose's glow brightened as she listened. She drew another picture, this one showing Tom finding her in the crashed ship, helping her heal, protecting her from her own people. Then she drew Earth again, but this time with hands reaching out in friendship rather than aggression. Exactly, Tom said. First contact shouldn't be about fear, it should be about hope. A distant echoing sound made them both freeze. Rose quickly dimmed her glow, and they listened intently. After a moment, they realized it was just water moving through the cave system. In the darkness, Rose began to make a series of musical tones, different from her usual communication sounds. The notes echoed softly off the cave walls, creating a haunting melody. "What is that?" Tom whispered. Rose took his hand and placed it over her heart, continuing the melody. Through their time together, Tom had learned that her people often expressed complex emotions through music. This song felt like a mixture of sadness, hope, and something else, something like affection. "You're sharing your heart song," Tom said, remembering one of their earlier conversations about her culture. "Your true feelings." Rose nodded, her glow pulsing gently in time with the melody. She pointed to him, then to herself, then drew a simple picture of two different worlds connected by a bridge. "You think we can change things," Tom said. "Change how your people see humans." Rose's song changed slightly, becoming more hopeful. She added another picture to her drawing. Two figures, one glowing and one human, standing together on the bridge between worlds. Tom understood. In these caves, hiding from those who would keep their species apart, something remarkable was happening. They weren't just two individuals anymore. They were becoming proof that different species could understand each other, trust each other, and care for each other. "Together," Tom said quietly. Rose's glow brightened in response, her song continuing to fill the cave with hope. Whatever came next, they had found something powerful here in the darkness, a connection that could change both their worlds. The search party found them at dawn. Tom and Rose had just moved to a new cave chamber when the air suddenly hummed with energy. Brilliant white lights flooded the cave, and 6 tall, glowing figures stepped through a shimmering portal. Their skin shone with the same bioluminescence as Rose's, but their expressions were cold and hard. "Step away from the navigator," the leader commanded in perfect English. His glow pulsed with authority and threat. "This situation does not concern you, human." Tom recognized him as Rose's former captain from her drawings. He stood his ground, positioning himself between Rose and her people. "Actually, it does concern me. You left her to die." The captain's glow flickered with surprise at Tom's defiance. "We followed protocol. The risk of human discovery was too great." His hand rested on a weapon at his belt. "Now stand aside. We must eliminate all evidence of our presence." Rose stepped forward, her musical voice ringing out in a series of sharp, challenging tones. The other luminaries seemed shocked at her boldness. The captain's glow darkened with anger. "You dare challenge our laws?" he demanded. "This human has seen too much, learned too much. The protocol is clear." "Your protocol is wrong," Tom said calmly, not moving from his protective stance. "Rose has shown me that there's so much more to your people than just fear and hiding. And I've shown her that humans aren't the monsters you think we are." The captain raised his weapon. "This is your final warning. Step aside." Instead of backing down, Tom spread his arms wide, making himself an easier target. "Go ahead. Show Rose she was right about how violent and fearful you are. Or," he paused, looking each luminary in the eye, "you could listen to what she's learned about us." Rose began to sing. It wasn't her usual communication tones, but the heart song she had shared with Tom in the caves. The sound echoed off the walls, filling the chamber with a melody of hope, trust, and possibility. The other luminaries' glows flickered in response, their expressions changing from hostile to uncertain. "This is her truth song," one of the search party members whispered. "She shares her deep knowing." The captain's weapon hand trembled slightly. "It doesn't matter. The law. The law is based on fear," Tom interrupted. "In the past 2 weeks, I've learned more about your people through Rose than you've learned about humans in years of hiding and watching. That's because we actually talked to each other, trusted each other." Rose stepped fully beside Tom now, her glow bright and steady. She reached down and took his hand, their fingers intertwining. The gesture wasn't lost on her people. Physical contact between species was practically unheard of in their culture. The captain stared at their joined hands, his glow pulsing with confusion. "You trust this human? After everything we know about their kind?" Rose nodded firmly. She pointed to Tom, then made the musical tone for different, but now it carried a new meaning. Not just different from what they expected, but different from what they feared. She drew quickly in their notebook, showing picture after picture of Tom helping her, protecting her, learning from her. The other luminary moved closer, their glows synchronizing as they studied the drawings. Tom noticed their weapons lowering, their expressions softening as they saw the story of friendship and trust unfold on the pages. "Perhaps," the captain said slowly, his own glow dimming from threat to consideration, "we have been too rigid in our judgment of humans." He looked at Tom with new eyes. "You could have reported us, called your authorities. Instead, you chose to help and protect one of our own." "That's what humans do," Tom said simply. "At least, that's what we can do when given the chance." Rose's song grew stronger, filling the cave with hope. The other luminary began to add their own harmonies, their glows brightening and dimming in a complex pattern. Tom didn't need to understand the words to know what was happening. This was the moment when everything could change. 3 months after the confrontation in the cave, Tom stood in a hidden meadow deep in the Montana forest. The morning sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, but an even more impressive light show was taking place on the ground. Dozens of luminaries stood in a circle, their combined glow creating patterns that danced through the air like aurora borealis. In the center of the circle stood Rose, her glow brighter than Tom had ever seen it. She wore formal robes that shimmered with each movement, marking her new position as Earth's first official luminary ambassador. Beside her stood Tom, dressed in his best ranger uniform, now serving as humanity's unofficial representative to the Luminary High Council. "The council has made their final decision," the captain announced, his voice carrying both authority and a hint of pride. He had become one of their strongest supporters after the events in the cave. "Based on Ambassador Rose's testimony and the evidence of human compassion demonstrated by Ranger Tom Baker, we will begin a new chapter in our history." Rose's musical tone rang out with joy, and the other luminary joined in, creating a symphony of celebration. She turned to Tom and smiled, drawing quickly in the notebook she still carried everywhere. The picture showed 2 worlds, Earth and the luminary homeworld, connected by a bright bridge of light. "It won't be immediate," the captain continued, speaking directly to Tom. "We must proceed carefully, introducing our peoples gradually to avoid panic. But your actions have proven that humanity is ready for contact, perhaps more ready than we were." Tom nodded, remembering those tense moments in the cave. "Fear can make anyone blind to possibilities," he said. "Sometimes it takes one small act of kindness to open our eyes." Rose made the musical tone for different, the sound that had once meant unexpected, then surprising, and now had come to mean wonderfully unique. She had taught this tone to the council, and they had added it to their official language, marking the first time in their history that they had adopted a word inspired by interaction with another species. "We have already begun preparations," one of the council members added, her glow pulsing with excitement. "Ambassador Rose will work with a select group of human representatives, starting with those in scientific and diplomatic fields. Together, they will create a framework for gradual revelation of our existence to your world." Tom smiled as Rose drew another picture, this one showing humans and Luminary working together, sharing knowledge and culture. In the 3 months since the confrontation, she had already helped establish secret communication channels between Earth's top scientists and Luminary researchers. Medical breakthroughs were already being quietly shared, saving lives on both worlds. "And what about the other species you've been hiding from?" Tom asked carefully. The captain's glow flickered with what Tom now recognized as embarrassment. "We will review those cases as well. Your example has shown us that our policy of isolation may have cost us many valuable connections." Rose reached out and squeezed Tom's hand, her glow synchronizing with his heartbeat, something they had discovered she could do during their time hiding in the caves. The gesture wasn't lost on the council members, who now watched with fascination rather than horror at the physical contact between species. "Sometimes," Tom said, addressing the whole assembly, "the best way to overcome fear is to reach out instead of pulling away. Rose taught me about the wonders beyond our world, and I hope I showed her that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our progress. It's our capacity for compassion." The meadow filled with music as the Luminary raised their voices in harmony. Rose joined in, and even though Tom couldn't sing their tones, he could feel the melody in his heart. Here, in a hidden corner of Earth, 2 species had found something remarkable, not just understanding or cooperation, but genuine friendship. As the song reached its crescendo, Rose finished her drawing. It showed the moment Tom had found her in the crashed ship, but now the image continued beyond that scene, showing all that had grown from that one act of kindness. Below it, she wrote in careful English, "Not left to die, left to live, left to change everything." The future would hold challenges, but as Tom stood among the glowing forms of their new allies, he knew that this was just the beginning of humanity's greatest adventure, learning they weren't alone and discovering they were better than anyone had imagined.